Hi and welcome back to the channel. My name is Nicole with morningchores.com, and today we're going to show you how to install a raised garden bed. Raised garden beds are very popular, but there's always two sides to the fence. You have people who love raised garden beds, you have people who are dead set against them, and then you have people like me who are kind of in the middle. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the pros and cons of using raised beds in your garden, and then we're going to show you how to build one and put one together. The first thing is you can fit more plants in a raised bed as opposed to planting them directly in the ground. Usually when you plant your plants directly in the ground, you're putting them in rows and leaving ample space on each side to walk up and down the rows and the aisles. But in a raised bed, you can put them a little bit more closer together, meaning you can get more bang for your buck when it comes to your fruits and vegetables. The next reason is you can extend your growing season. With the soil being above the ground in a raised bed, the soil heats up more quickly in the springtime and also encourages better drainage, so you're able to start planting in your raised beds much sooner than directly in the ground. Raised beds also help keep your garden much more organized. It's easier to keep track of where things are at, and it also helps you keep track of crop rotation if you like to rotate your crops each year. So it's just an easier way to keep track of what's going on in the garden. Another great reason to implement raised garden beds is it's easier on the back. If you struggle with back issues, or maybe you're an elderly person who still loves the garden but can't really get on the ground too well anymore to plant things and weed, then maybe try raised beds. By putting in raised beds, you can make them very high to whatever level is comfortable for you, and it makes it much easier to manage your garden. And the last reason is for soil protection. Because you have everything in a raised bed, it's easier to avoid walking on your plants, especially when they're young and they're just starting to come up. It's always hard to keep track of where they're at and where they're not. But by having them all in a raised bed, you can actually avoid this. And this is especially true with little ones. If you have little children, it's much easier to keep them from trampling on the young plants as opposed to planting directly in the ground. The first con to having raised garden beds is excessive heat and drainage. Now, I know I mentioned in the pros that this could be a good thing, but it can also be a detriment. Because the soil in your raised garden bed is heating up more quickly, that may mean that you have to water more frequently. Now, if you keep that soil covered, like I've mentioned before, with wood chips or straw, then this will help keep the correct level of water and moisture in your soil so that you don't have to water as much. Another con to raised garden beds is it costs more. There's some more upfront costs because you're having to build the raised beds and then put them in place, as opposed to planting directly in the soil. There's a little bit less cost with that. So that's something to keep in mind as well, especially if you have a really big garden. Another detriment to raised garden beds is less circulation. Because you can fit more plants in a garden bed, there's less circulation for your plants, and this could be a detriment to their success. So always keep that in mind and make sure you put ample space around each plant as you're planting. And the last detriment to raised garden beds is plants can rot before they grow. I had this happen to me with potatoes. When I harvest my potatoes in the fall, I always take my biggest, best potatoes and I plant them directly in the ground at harvest time, and then they stay there all winter, and then come spring they start to grow. Well, the second year I did this, I decided to try it in a raised bed, and it did not work for me. The potatoes ended up rotting before they started to grow. So when it comes to root vegetables or bulb plants that you plant in the fall and you wait for in the springtime, raised beds are probably not the best choice. But anything else like peppers and tomatoes, things that you're planting in the springtime, then the raised bed will be just fine. Now that we've discussed the pros and cons of raised garden beds, I'll let you guys decide for yourself. But right now, we're gonna head to the garage and start building our very own raised bed, and then I'm gonna show you how to set it up. The supplies for this job are very simple. The first thing you need is an electric screwdriver with an assortment of drill bits. I have this one here to install the screws and these to make the pilot holes. The next thing you need are 3-inch exterior screws. These are also known as deck screws. And the last thing you need, of course, is your wood. I'm using 12x2 boards here that I had cut at the home improvement store. The size of your garden bed is really personal preference. I chose to make mine here 62 inches long by 28.5 inches wide. The first step in our assembly process is to mark with a pencil where we want to put our pilot holes. And as you can see, I'm marking 3 holes down the height of these short boards. These are the boards that will go on the end of your garden bed. So again, I'm marking them here, 1, 2, and 3. The next step is to put in our pilot holes, and I'm putting these where I marked my holes with the pencil, and this will make it much easier to apply our screws and attach the pieces of wood together. Attaching the Phillips drill bit, we're now ready to put this thing together. The last step in our assembly process is to apply the screws to where you made your pilot holes. This should go very quickly because we did the pilot holes first. You should have a total of 3 screws on each end of your short boards, making a total of 6 screws on each end. When choosing a location for your garden bed, you want to choose a spot that gets full sun. Once your location has been chosen, the next step is to dig the soil up a little bit where your bed's going to sit. That way the wood sits slightly in the ground. Once our garden bed is in place, the next step is to level it up. We just want it to be nice and level because it'll look more aesthetically nice and it'll just make it easier to maintain. The first step in our Back to Eden garden method is to lay down 3 to 4 sheets of newspaper on top of the grass. The purpose of this is to smother the grass underneath so that it's not competing with our plants, but in turn it will turn it into compost, which will add nutrition to the soil. Once the newspaper is down, now it's time to add the soil. You want to preferably use an organic composted soil. The higher quality, the better it will be for your plants. So begin by just putting a little bit here and there to secure the newspaper. Once the newspaper is secure, you can go ahead and dump the bags of dirt and keep doing this until it is almost full to the top. Now that you have enough soil in there, you want to smooth it out and make it as even as possible. Now it's time for the extra fun part, and that's planting. I'm planting raspberry plants that a gracious friend gave me. I needed an extra space for these, so I thought the raised garden bed would be perfect since these tend to multiply with every year. And then the last step, of course, is to cover your soil with wood chips. You could also use straw or composted leaves, but this will help retain the appropriate moisture of the soil and protect the plants. Thank you so much for joining me in today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. Also head over to morningchores.com where you'll find all kinds of information on gardening, homesteading, DIY, and much, much more. Have a wonderful day, and we'll see you next time.